CrowdStrike's a well-known product, it's a good product. The actual outage was tied to bad software in their supply chain, and they had change control problems. But you have to use something like CrowdStrike or a competitor. But that tool you're using broke, and it took out all your technology. So you can't control it as a business, or you can't control bad software from CrowdStrike or Microsoft or Amazon. You kind of have to depend on that technology. What do you do if that technology fails? Because it's happening more and more often. Your technology fails, your partner technology fails, whatever it may be. What do you do if your technology is down? And that's what business resiliency is. Pretty much everybody has the problem, the starting block, Zarina, which is a good inventory of your stuff.
Yeah.
Do you really know who your partners are? Do you really know who your workers are? So you could have employees, contractors, interns, vendors, whatever it may be. Do you know what your technology is? Do you know what your data is? So starting with that first question, really, what is our stuff? That's the interesting thing about the US government. There is no set cybersecurity regulation that says you must do this. And there's a patchwork of expectations, obligations, regulatory, I guess, rules.
AI, I meant AI regulation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I'll pivot to that in a second. But
Yeah.
cybersecurity has been an issue for 20 some years. There really isn't a standard cybersecurity rule and law per se. Again, there's pieces. I think the same thing is going to apply to artificial intelligence. The US government's probably not going to make an artificial intelligence law that says everybody must do exactly this. There'll be bits and pieces, and it'll be a framework of healthcare does this and finance does that. But all of those, even in the cybersecurity space, say things like if you manage your risk and you leverage the NIST frameworks, we will account for that if there were an incident. So kind of what the government does in the US is they build these standards and frameworks, and if you leverage them, it kind of takes the place of your risk programs.
Welcome to the Grow and Learn podcast, your go-to source for expertise and insights on a variety of topics: business growth, leadership, technology, personal and business finance, and more. We've curated a vast network of business experts ready to address your company's most pressing challenges. Reach out to us for more information or schedule a call at grownlearn.org to explore how we can support you. Today, I'm speaking to Fractional Cybersecurity Officer Terry Ziemniak. He's been a front runner in a tech entrepreneurial conference outside Charlotte. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to speak with you.
Good to have you. Terry, there's a lot going on around cybersecurity. There's so much talk in the World Economic Forum and where not about the impending threats of cybersecurity. And we were witnessing one of these recently with CrowdStrike. Where do you see companies missed an opportunity to secure their databases, their everything, whatever you're securing with cybersecurity?
Well, I think that one of the big lessons of CrowdStrike can be and should be for business leaders is a reminder that cybersecurity is more than technology. So you need the firewalls, you need antivirus, you need encryption, but a big focus of cybersecurity over the past decade has been on a phrase, Zarina, business resiliency. So do your best to make sure the bad things don't happen, but if they do, how do you survive? And CrowdStrike over the, I guess a week and a half ago, they're a great example of what we're talking about. So CrowdStrike's a well-known product, it's a good product. The actual outage was tied to bad software in their supply chain, and they had change control problems. But you have to use something like CrowdStrike or a competitor. But that tool you're using broke, and it took out all your technology. So you can't control it as a business, or you can't control bad software from CrowdStrike or Microsoft or Amazon. You kind of have to depend on that technology. What do you do if that technology fails? Because it's happening more and more often. Your technology fails, your partner technology fails, whatever it may be. What do you do if your technology is down? And that's what business resiliency is. You need to understand really what your business does, take the time to think through it and say, how do we make payroll if our technology is offline? How do we satisfy our contractual obligations if our technology is offline? How do we continue to foster the sales cycles of our technologies, all one, whatever it may be. But I think that's the big lesson learned, and business leaders should be thinking about it is let's avoid the bad stuff. But if it does happen, how do you survive? And again, that's that phrase people should put in their pocket: business resiliency.
I understand, but it also reminds me of the problems that we had with supply chain in the COVID time, because nobody had a backup plan, as what you're talking about, business resiliency in this case. And the question is whether it really is a viable option when sometimes the development of such a technology that these monopolies have had the capital to develop, small companies, startups, do they have the opportunity even to go in this route?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And that's a great analogy to the broader business dependencies that makes our modern economy work. There's no way, no company is going to write a tool equivalent to Crowdstrike. Right. You're not going to write a tool equivalent to Windows operating system. You're not going to write your own Amazon Web Services. You have to depend on partners for these sorts of things. Just like to your point, you have to depend on someone to make your computers for you, and someone's got to make ballpoint pens for you, and they got to make whatever. Mm-hmm. You have all these dependencies that make your business function, but you got to think about it. Protect yourself to reduce the risk. But if the guy making your ballpoint pens goes out of business, how do you survive? You know, if again, Crowdstrike has a problem and goes down, how do you survive as a business? So the idea of business resiliency is really think about what your business does, almost start at a mission level sort of statement. We do this, this is important to us, and kind of work through that process, determine what's important to you, and then worst case scenario, how do we survive as a business? So that you got a great point. There's direct analogies and comparisons to the physical supply chain that we have to worry about.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it is an emergency route for, like, whenever they have on the stairs the exit plan for in case of an emergency, what you do in case of a downtime of systems or whatever is going on. So
yeah, absolutely. And I'll add that these are not big exercises. So you don't need to pay $100,000 to have a consultant build your business resiliency plan, but you have to make sure it's there. So these can be small exercises, especially if you're a small, mid-sized company. Small exercises, it's almost like a due diligence function. Yeah. Think through these things and spend one day a year walking through these plans, make sure they make sense, test them out. Modify so your business evolves year by year. Your business resiliency plan may need to be modified as well. Your partners change year to year. Your business resiliency plans will be impacted by it. So these aren't huge exercises, but it's a little bit of effort you really have to do to be diligent and protect your business.
Mm-hmm. I come from the telecom industry. Like 10 years ago, I used to work in the telecom, and I can imagine the complexity of systems in such a company, especially in a large conglomerate. What are some of the basic steps that need to be taken? You mentioned it's a big exercise, but let's talk about the bulk actions in certain areas, maybe that need to be taken to ensure business continuity.
Yeah, that's great. So what that would consist of, I tell you, a common problem I see across A, through my career, and B, as a consultant now. So I consult a number of small, mid-sized businesses as a security executive. And I walk through these exercises. Pretty much everybody has the problem, the starting block, Zarina, which is a good inventory of your stuff. Yeah. Do you really know who your partners are? Do you really know who your workers are? So you could have employees, contractors, interns, vendors, whatever it may be. Do you know what your technology is? Do you know what your data is? So starting with that first question, really, what is our stuff? And do that very well. Make sure you clearly understand your contractual expectations, your regulatory expectations, your people, your products, your technology. If you don't understand your stuff, everything else falls apart. You can't patch correctly if you don't know all your technology. You can't train people unless you really know all your people. You can't do business resiliency planning until you really think through what are your critical business processes, so that foundational block everyone sticks on and gets stuck. What is our stuff? So I'll tell you that's the foundational block everybody stumbles on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So when it comes to startups and small, medium-sized companies, and what would you say to their point? I don't have the funding right now to deal with this. It's not my priority. I'm focusing on sales, on revenue generation. This is like, I do want to do it, but it's on the back of my list. What would you say is as a counter as a counter comment on that?
Honestly, I wouldn't counter. I think that in many cases, that's a valid business statement based on where you are in your life cycle. A small business doesn't need to be Fort Knox. They don't have to be bulletproof, but they need to have the basic and foundational understanding of what's going on and where they need to be. So I like to use the phrase secure enough. So as a very small business, what's secure enough means for a small business is different than what it means for a mid-sized company, and it's different from what it means from a large enterprise. So as a very small startup, I would say what is secure enough is really very, very minimum, which is maybe protect your business assets. A startup, make sure your email's secure. Make sure you've got your bank account locked up correctly. Make sure your social media sorts of stuff. Very, very basic stuff. And then as they grow, it's going to be questions like secure enough has to start including, am I secure enough to sell? So if you're a small business and a startup, you're selling to companies, to businesses, maybe to the government, whatever it may be. You need to understand these outside statements that say, hey, secure enough for you means, I don't know, you got to be HIPAA compliant. You have to be PCI, which is the credit card company requirements. You got to be PCI compliant, whatever it may be. But as you grow, that line in the sand of security is going to go up and up and up and up. And that's okay because it's a business risk. And like any other business risk, you have to properly manage it. And it's a good reminder, you're never done with security. You can get better. At a certain point, maybe you're misspending, maybe you're overspending in cybersecurity. Sometimes buying another piece of security hardware doesn't gain you much. And maybe a better plan is don't buy more security hardware, but maybe spend your time on training people. Maybe spend your time on disaster recovery planning, whatever it may be. So end of the day, it kind of comes down to, again, what is secure enough for you? And I would complement that also with the idea of your security story. So if you're a small business owner, again, we all know you're not going to be super secure, but startup company, what is your cybersecurity story? And that should be things like, I know my business is going to drive me to use healthcare data and we're using artificial intelligence, whatever it may be. So our security story is we're planning in 2024 to be fully HIPAA compliant. And in 2025, we're going to do an alignment exercise against, the AI risk standards that the government's come out, whatever it may be. But if you can build a cybersecurity story as an entrepreneur, that should go in your toolbox of other stories. So you've got business stories, and you've got these emotional stories and financial stories, whatever it may be. Because as a startup, you don't really have much. You have an idea, you have a plan, you have people, and you're moving forward. But cybersecurity should be one more story that you're prepared to talk about. You've thought about it. It's on the roadmap, and you're managing the risk. And that's how I tell smaller companies, especially startups, how to manage cybersecurity.
Yeah. You previously worked as a VP of CyberTech in a very large healthcare company. What areas did you cover, or who did you have to involve in a conversation in order to secure the CyberTech? I don't know what you're securing, the business continuity, business resiliency.
Yeah. No, that's about the middle of my career. I spent a decade as Chief Information Security Officer across 3 different large health systems here in the United States. So they're multi-billion-dollar, multi-hospital organizations. And it was interesting, you talked about how do we secure. Even in that decade, there was an evolution of cybersecurity. So 2008 or something like that, it started out, I reported up to the Chief Information Officer, so the techie guy in this case. And we were doing technical things to secure the organization. And I was just kind of the techie expert in the cybersecurity space. Fast forward 10 years later, I was at another organization, and their main objective, one of the big deliverables I had assigned with, was take cybersecurity out of IT. So I took cybersecurity outside of IT and I put it in the legal department. So that was a recognition, the evolution of cybersecurity, that cyber is a business risk has a lot of technical components and a lot of protections around the technical space. But cybersecurity involves, like we said, business resiliency, user education, contractual protections, risk management, compliance. All that stuff really fits nicely outside of IT in many cases. So the evolution that I've seen is managing as a business risk. Again, just like you'd manage your financial risk and your competitive risk, other risks you have to manage. So that was the big evolution. Now the question of who I had to partner with, frankly, I had to partner with everyone.
Yeah.
So I met regularly with the CEOs of the hospitals. I met regularly with the chief, this is all healthcare, chief nursing officers, because the majority of the staff was nurses.
Mm-hmm.
I met the facilities folks. I've met the medical records folks. So as an executive, I was kind of the cultural guy and the directional guy. So it was important to speak with these people, but also listen to them to make sure we're not blocking their ability to execute our really important mission. Mission is healthcare, is take care of people. If you're too secure to take care of people, your mission fails. On the other hand, if you're not secure enough and you have and shut down your system, you still can't take care of people. So it's a balancing line. So it was really a business level position that I would be able to interact with all the other leaders to, again, coalesce, the evolve the culture and get everyone part of the cybersecurity team.
Mm-hmm. And Terry, you mentioned there's a lot of evolution, and clearly, the world is evolving, business is evolving, technology is evolving. And I've spoken to a few people who are specialists in AI, and they all talked about the impact of AI on cybersecurity and on information security. And so some of them mentioned, although there's a lot of noise being created around ChatGPT, the actual adoption of AI tools is not yet there, yet the security needs need to be taken into account beforehand. What is your stance on AI security?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of disappointed. We're 12 minutes in before we talked about AI. So AI, we got to talk about that. It's a very popular topic.
Yeah.
I tell you, it's kind of in my world, there's three aspects of artificial intelligence that security has to at least be aware of or account for. So number one, AI is being built into all the cybersecurity tools. So Crowdstrike, for example, or your email filtering tool, whatever it may be. So ask me as a cybersecurity practitioner, artificial intelligence is being rolled, it frankly has been rolled into the tools over the past 5 or 10 years. So it's kind of baked into what the cybersecurity guys and gals do out there. So that's great. It helps us. It makes us better at our job. Though keeping in mind the bad guys effectively have the opposite part of the tool. So they're attacking us using AI as well. So keep that in mind. So it's kind of built into the tools the good guys and the bad guys use. The second aspect is the basic consumer part of artificial intelligence. So ChatGPT, Copilot that's built in a lot of the Microsoft products, all the things that a typical business user, knowledge user, there's a lot of tools out there. And the big risk in that space, really from a business owner's point of view, is data leak and data governance. So, hey, should Zarina be sending our spreadsheet out to ChatGPT? Should Terry be using a Copilot to draft emails, whatever it may be? So that second pillar is the business use of kind of commercial grade artificial intelligence. Big, it's adding value to business. It's great, but really the risk there is data usage and make sure we don't misuse it. Then final, the third bucket is those making their own artificial intelligence tools. So there's large, financial organizations, healthcare. With the globs of data these organizations have accumulated over the years, they're now writing tools to manage and derive value out of that data. So the people building the tools. And interesting, I just started a project last week where we're helping a large financial organization help them define the concepts of trustworthiness. So if you're making an artificial intelligence app that does, I don't know, picture HR. The candidates that are coming in. You have artificial intelligence will skim through all your candidates, make decisions based on historically what you picked. But those sorts of tools have maybe bias built into them. That maybe we don't really know why it picks Zarina versus Terry. So there's transparency concerns in there. So that all falls under the realm of trustworthiness. And there's frameworks that help you understand and clarify trustworthiness. So again, as a builder of artificial intelligence, there's a whole other sphere of concerns around trustworthiness, and I'm working on projects in that space. Well, real interesting stuff, but
That is super
that's the
interesting.
evolution.
That is
Yeah.
super interesting indeed. And you mentioned these were proprietary AI tools that are developed. How about the other tools that are available on published by large corporations, monopolies? How do we know if they're compliant with our own business?
Yeah, so as an end user, if you're more or less a business user using some of this commercial off-the-shelf AI, again, ChatGPT we spoke about, Copilot built into Microsoft products these days. It really, from a business cybersecurity, business perhaps privacy, business data governance point of view, as a business unit, your concern really is where's the data going. So if you throw your information in a chat GPT in general, it's gone and it's out there. You might as well just be posting on Google at that point. So again, these are adding value to business entities, but as a business leader, you got to stop for a second, really just take time and think, what are our rules around these generative AI or whatever the AI tool may be? So as a business leader, I would say take some time, think about, if you want to support chat GPT, provide clarity to your end users on what's allowable and what's not. So a simple policy statement of, we never, if we're a healthcare organization, we never put medical information in chat GPT. We never put sensitive business data in chat GPT. We never put whatever it may be. Decide what's allowable and what's not. And maybe, again, for small business owners, maybe it's, these are the 10 valid use cases. Or these are the 10 cases where you expressly say no. But again, the risk to the business owner is that data leakage. So take some time to think about what's allowable, what's not, and write policy, train people. But that really is the risk, to just data going out the door.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to making sure that the input in the AI system is correct, even if it's a off-the-shelf product of a large organization, let's move away from ChatGPT, but maybe another example that I can't give you at the moment because I don't know any well-known AI systems, but let's say there is one available. Even Crowdstrike, you said, had AI implemented. Do we need to think about the input that was the assumptions, the original assumptions from an ethical perspective or from whatever other perspective we are concerned about as a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So and I would expand upon that idea as arena of valid use cases. So as an organization, we're going to allow you to use Bard, which is the Google Chat GPT, the sort of generative stuff, to summarize our meeting notes. Maybe that's your use case you want to do that, or Zoom's got it built in these days. Otter, there's a lot of tools that do that. Overlay Zoom will record it and transcribe your conversation and summarize and do assignments and whatnot. Neat technology, again, adds a lot of value. But then it comes down to, if we allow a artificial intelligence assistant to sit in our Zoom calls, what are the rules around it? If we're talking about sensitive business information, the rule is you don't allow the assistant in. If we're talking, maybe the notes that it creates, we have to secure that. So yeah, if you're using a AI tool of some sort, you've got to define what's allowable and what's not. Frankly, you need some kind of structure in your business, which typically you call data governance, to kind of identify what's allowable and what's not. Again, if you're going to go a little more aggressive and do leverage tools to skim candidates out for your HR pools, again, for example, if you only historically happen to have hired 50-year-old white men, and that's the training model that it uses to pick candidates going forward, you've got bias built in because your data source is kind of flawed to start with. So yeah, you got to take the time to think about, if this thing's making decisions for you, do you know how the decision's made? Is again biased, the data that's going in bad? So I wouldn't take lightly those turning on tools like that, because you're going to have lawsuits, and it's bad output anyway, but you can harm the business further in that you're going to have lawsuits. So I guess if a company's being aggressive in conversations like that, If nothing else, I would go look up in the US, there's a NIST, the National Institutes of Standard Technology. That's the government body that helps companies define things like, what does it mean to be encrypted? How do you manage a risk? Those kind of cybersecurity and privacy concepts. Anyway, NIST has an excellent framework around artificial intelligence. Okay. And they will help you think through, how do we make sure we don't build bias into what we do, which is exactly that HR candidate example that we talked about. Not an easy read through. You're probably going to need an expert to help you. But as a business leader, at least put the brakes on and think we may have a risk in this area. So I think the point to the business leaders is think about those sorts of concerns. And if you guys want to proceed down that path, how to do it safely.
That's a great service from NIST. Is this the name of the organization? NIST?
Yeah, NIST. And for the cybersecurity folks out there, which maybe just me on this podcast, but they also have kind of the preeminent cybersecurity framework. So if you're comparing apples to apples of cybersecurity programs across the US and frankly across a lot of the US or the world, the NIST cybersecurity framework is kind of the preeminent one out there. And the advantage of these frameworks, Zarina, is if you're doing, whether it's AI work or cybersecurity work, they provide a comprehensive view of what you should be looking at. So on the cybersecurity front, if you're thinking, I need to buy one more piece of technology and I'm secure, if you look at the framework, technology is a small slice of cybersecurity. The cybersecurity framework reminds you, hey, you need business continuity, you need contractual protections, you got to practice your ability to recover from cybersecurity. So the advantage of these frameworks is it gives you a large, high-level view of what you should be doing to make sure you're not too focused in one area. It gives you a broad overview of how to protect your organization from, in this case, cybersecurity or AI risks. So yeah, NIST has a lot of great stuff. It's not easy reading though, but it really is a standard. So when we go back to that cybersecurity story concept, Zarina, if you want to have a cybersecurity story or maybe even an artificial intelligence story, if your story can say we are NIST aligned, we leverage these standards that the whole world uses, or we are leveraging going forward the NIST artificial intelligence framework. That's a great component to your AI story, because your prospects and your clients are going to say, hey, I know Zarina and her team is just getting started, but they know where they're headed. They're listening to us and they're hearing things like, I'm worried about the tool you're producing. Zarina says, hey, we're leveraging these frameworks going forward. So again, part of your toolbox of stories, NIST frameworks is a great thing to add to that.
In December last year, there was an AI regulation adopted in Europe. I have not read it. I just know it's out there because I checked it. I don't know how wide encompassing it is, but I know there is no such in the US. So when it comes to these frameworks that you just mentioned coming from the NIST, are they kind of forward thinking regarding a potential AI regulation that will come sooner or later? Or how do we implement upfront regulations that will come in these frameworks that we apply in our companies?
Well, that's the interesting thing about the US government. There is no set cybersecurity regulation that says you must do this. And there's a patchwork of expectations, obligations, regulatory, I guess, rules.
AI, I meant AI regulation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So I'll pivot to that in a second. But cybersecurity has been an issue for 20 some years. There really isn't a standard cybersecurity rule and law per se. Again, there's pieces. I think the same thing is going to apply to artificial intelligence. The US government's probably not going to make an artificial intelligence law that says everybody must do exactly this. There'll be bits and pieces, and it'll be a framework of healthcare does this and finance does that. But all of those, even in the cybersecurity space, say things like, if you manage your risk and you leverage the NIST frameworks, we will account for that if there were an incident. So kind of what the government does in the US is they build these standards and frameworks, and if you leverage them, it kind of takes the place of your your risk program. So if I were to put on my forward-looking glasses 10 years from now, if you built an artificial tool or were using an AI artificial intelligence tool and you had a structure and you were managing it per the NIST suggestions and the NIST framework, that's going to satisfy really what you need, because there's going to be no overarching law per se in the US. So it's the sound risk management is really the expectations historically, and I think that's going to be the case going forward. But I will contrast that with Europe. Europe's a little different. They do have those sorts of laws. GDPR is in the cybersecurity and privacy space. They're building AI ones as well, so they're more prescriptive. Now, the real smart folks in the research, they've actually tied two together. So they actually have mappings of NIST standards and European laws. So behind the scenes, these things are mapped together by the researchers and the smart folks that read these things in detail. So again, US, I would suggest build on these US NIST standards, because that's going to be the protection you need 5 or 10 years from now.
Wow, fantastic. This was very informative indeed. So Terry, what kind of companies are you focusing on helping right now? And I know that you're working on various projects as we mentioned, as a fractional cybersecurity technology officer, but what is your current focus?
Just my current focus is, it's kind of twofold. One is I work with a number of clients as a fractional cybersecurity executive. And what that means is bring me in and I'll work maybe one day a week, setting strategy and acting as an executive, executing the roadmap, interfacing with partners, working on the sales calls, whatever it may be. So as a fractional cybersecurity executive is great because I get to work with a lot of small, mid-sized businesses, see different technologies, learn different businesses. So that's really the majority of what I do. I do also pick up some occasional projects. As I mentioned, I do some alignment stuff, rapid maturity. So really, again, what I focus on is small, mid-sized businesses managing their cyber risk is the space that I play.
Fantastic. How can people get a hold of you? And then I want to ask you one more question before we end it for today. But first, how can people find you?
Got it. Thank you. I'm a partner at a company called Tech CXO. And we're basically a large group of fractional executives. We have fractional financial officers and technology partners and information folks. I'm in the cybersecurity team. So if you're looking for me, Tech CXO is the name of the company.
Tech CXOs. All right. Fantastic. And to end it, I'm going to ask you a question related to Crowdstrike. We began with it and let's end with it as well. Looking at this company alone as an isolated case, not on its impact on other companies and the interdependencies of businesses, but this particular company, what could they have done better for their information security internally to prevent the spread of this? What was it? It wasn't a virus, but it was like I read different comments, like a Trojan horse. It was something like that.
No, it was actually none of that. So I'll talk about kind of the situation, then we'll kind of work backwards to your question. So the actual situation, remember what Crowdstrike is. Crowdstrike is effectively a real fancy antivirus tool. So it's required to be installed on your Windows computer. It's got to dig down really deep into the operating system to protect you from viruses and ransomware and all that sorts of scary stuff. But because of that, it's installed very low in the operating system, and the Windows really trusts this little bit that Crowdstrike or its competitors provide. The issue is Crowdstrike basically produced an updated version that had a bug in it. So this was not a cybersecurity. It wasn't a hack. It wasn't a virus. Basically, this little utility they gave you had a bug in it. It got installed everywhere, and that bug is what blew up Windows.
So how is it possible that this bug was not tested multiple times? Isn't this what is usually done with releases, technology release?
It is, and from what I've read over the past couple of days, basically the Crowdstrike folks said there was a problem in their change control process. So they write code, they test it, and they sign off on it, and they deploy it. That process, I think, latest I heard is they said that there was actually the change control tool which manages these upgrades. The tool had a bug in it, is what they're claiming. So again, Crowdstrike relies on a tool to deploy and test and manage their changes. They're saying that tool had a bug in it. So something went through that should have been caught, but the tool's broken.
Okay, and that tool was not produced by them?
No, it was not.
No, it was not.
So if you're writing code, you typically rely on a lot of code writing tools.
I see.
So they write code, they rely on tools, and frankly, those tools rely on tools. So that's the big supply chain.
Yeah.
And if any one of those breaks, in theory, it blows up Zarina's computer. This is what we saw. So it wasn't a cybersecurity issue anywhere. It was basic. I was writing computer code 30 years ago in college. This is stuff that I was doing. Write code, make sure it's not broken, and send it out. But CrowdStrike tool, because it's trusted by Windows, very sensitive, and a small break in CrowdStrike will blow up a computer. Conversely, if you had a small problem with your Adobe Reader, you probably have Adobe on your computer. If there were a problem with Adobe Reader and they had a bad piece of software, it wouldn't blow up your computer. It would blow up just the ability to read PDFs. Again, CrowdStrike is trusted by Windows. A small problem at that trusted level blows up the whole computer. That's what it came down to.
Okay. And could there have been something done regarding business continuity, and maybe it was outside of that, maybe it was in the process department, or could there have been something done to prevent this from happening? Maybe testing of the testing.
Well, it's risk management. So yeah, you could always add more levels of checks and validation. At a certain point, do you need to validate a piece of code 10 times? Do you need to validate it 5 times? Do you validate it 3 times? So they've been doing this for years. CrowdStrike is not a bad company. They've been very successful. They do good stuff, but it's just a good reminder how sensitive these processes are. Zarina, if they had run the change checks 2 times, would they catch every single possible bad piece of code? If they do it 3 times, 4 times, it's risk management. It's hard. It's hard to say because every company has problems like this. Tesla sends out updates to their cars all the time. Microsoft Windows does it. Google does it. You've got to change your software on a regular basis, and every change has a little bit of risk. And you've seen bad code come out all the time. It's just kind of the nature of what we build. And again, take a business owner message is work with good sound partners, which CrowdStrike is. But if they have a problem, how does your business survive? If your computers are offline for 4 or 5 days, how do you survive? So the message to the business leader is business resiliency. Hope your technology stays up. Do your best to keep the technology up. But if it does go down, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Fantastic way to end. And yet I'm coming up with another question, Terry. People are talking about the future of AI. Is it writing code, on the AI starting to write its own code, right? So do you think that this would alleviate such potential gaps in?
No, I tell you no, because if you think about what software development is a process, there's a number of steps to write code and get it down to Zarina's computer. So you got before you write code, you got to think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. You got to understand the dependencies because all these pieces all fit together. Then you got to write the code. Then you got to test the code. Then you got to send the code out. So there's a lot of steps along the way. AI is going to help with bits and pieces of it. So they'll help with a little bit of the coding. But if, for example, earlier in the workflow, if you don't understand the business requirements correctly, artificial intelligence doesn't help you. If on the other side of the workflow, if the deployment to Zarina's computer doesn't work well, it's going to blow up. So there's a lot of pieces in this big string that we call secure code development. AI will help with a bit and maybe more and more, but they don't own the whole work chain. And if that whole thing is not owned by AI, you have these risks. And even we talked about trustworthiness of AI about 10 minutes ago, Zarina. So how do you trust that AI is writing it correctly? You're still going to have these validations that you have to wrap around it because, again, trustworthiness of AI. How do you know it's writing good code? You still have to do these validation checks on the back end.
Very fantastic information. I enjoyed this talk very much, very informative. It opens up a new perspective in my understanding of cybersecurity. Thank you very much. Once again, people can find you at techcxos.com.
Correct. Yeah. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Ziemniak, they can also look you up on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Terry. I enjoyed this talk.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business, as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, visit my website at grownlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us, and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.